There's war going on in this world. A war on freedom.
He's acting outside of his authority by saying you can't put something that you want in your own body. That's your own personal choice, and can't nobody take that from you, you know?
You're one of these taxpayers, and these are all your documents, and this is how we're going to rob you. It's fucked up, man.
It's more war, it's more spending, it's more debt, and it's less freedom.
We don't do that here.
Some people think that you can't be radical and pragmatic.
This is what we need, is a pragmatic radicalism, not moderation. Hardcore radicalism, but smart shit.
It's not sitting in a fucking basement with a bunch of fucking nerds.
You don't know shit, and that's the thing. You have to talk to people who think differently than you.
Like, his focus is not how horrible the government is, it's how wonderful liberty and freedom are.
That's what drives us.
People are coming together more and more and more and more as the government has been failing us.
We're just getting started. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fight for Liberty Live. I'm super excited about today's show. I've been wanting to talk to this person on the show for quite some time. Heard way too many stories from mutual friends and finally getting to have a nice sit-down conversation. But first, if you are watching this stream on YouTube or Twitter or any of the big tech monopoly platforms, I want you to go into the description and click the link and go watch this on Odysee. We're trying to push as much of the following over to Odysee as possible right now. Give them our business, give them our viewership, because they're awesome. They promote free speech. They're not going to deplatform us. It's built on a blockchain. It's crypto based. You know the owners. They've been on the show. Just go over to Odysee. And if you make an account and you start actually using it, you can earn crypto by just watching shit and following people and liking stuff. So go on over to Odysee. It's fun. And you can watch this stream over there, and I will try to be keeping an eye on the comments from the Odysee stream while we're live. To the sponsors, you guys know and love Nugg of Knowledge by now. It is the way in which I'm normally getting high during these streams, and it is the way that you should be getting high while you're watching these streams. So go on over to nuggofknowledge.com, and you can check out all of the great premium cannabis products that they have over there. You can use promo code F4L and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. And it will go to help FSM, the show, other libertarians that you know and love. And 10% of every purchase that you make on Nugg of Knowledge goes towards helping end the war on drugs. So it's just like a win-win-win all around for you guys. Go to nuggofknowledge.com, use the promo code, and then come back over to here and finish watching this awesome episode. Last but not least, on the sponsorships, we've got a new one. Mr. Harrison Kemp is running for governor of Maine and doing some awesome work up there in the middle of fucking nowhere. And so if you want to help turn wilderness into a liberty-loving land, go on over to kempformaine.com, throw him a couple of bucks, check out his platform, volunteer if you can, and yeah, that's it for today. So without further ado, we have a second generation lifetime libertarian coming on the show today, the one, the only, Avens O'Brien. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me. You know, it's been a bit since I've been on a podcast, and I was like, oh, wow, I'm almost nervous about this. So, you know, there goes the weed.
Well, I couldn't imagine doing a show. I have had to do a few shows here and there sober. They're not fun. I don't do podcasts without weed. It's not a thing for me.
I just find it easier to like then kind of, I don't know, loosen up. Mm-hmm. But you know, it's good either way. So you're smoking your sponsor's product? Oh, you know what? I just realized I might be, if I'm having signal issues, if I start to like, you know, drop out or something, tell me and I can switch my Wi-Fi because I have two. Okay.
So far you're all right. I think mine is the one that just glitched out there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, your fault. That's fine. I'll tell you if you glitch out. You tell me if I glitch out. We'll, you know, our viewers will, you know, see our technical difficulties.
Yeah, I feel like it's not a true Fight for Liberty stream if there aren't technical difficulties at this point. It's just a thing that I expect by now.
Yeah.
So I normally start off with kind of like a libertarian testimony question, but you don't exactly have the same journey into liberty as the rest of my guests normally do. So I'm curious, when did you first like take ownership of the ideology as your own instead of just kind of tagging along with your parents?
Well, it's funny because I grew up, I mean, like contextual for people listening. My parents were very involved in first the objectivist movement and then moved over to the LP. They worked on the Hospers campaign in 72. And then my mother convinced my grandfather to run as a libertarian for Congress in 1974. My dad volunteered on that campaign. They met, they had my brothers. And so it was funny because like my parents like did all this LP activism. And at the time, it's funny to think of like the people that we consider figures today being like really accessible. So like the same way that I could like choose, let's say Bob Murphy, and I could say, hey, will you come and speak at this thing? And I could just like call him up and get him to come to this thing now. Like Murray Rothbard used to be like that accessible. And so like my parents were like, hey, we'd like to host a salon where Murray Rothbard comes and speaks. So, which is fun because then I find these random troves of stuff of theirs of like random notes he left at their house in 1978. So that's
Nice.
fun. But like all like handwritten notes from him. But anyway, so like my parents, did like LP leadership in like the LPNH because they were from New Hampshire. They did all this stuff and then they were like raising us as, weird and as possible. And my parents weren't like, how do I phrase this? They didn't, make us do all the libertarian shit, but it was like, I was very aware of like what my parents were into. I think my mother ran for governor of New Hampshire, like the year I was born, the year before I was born. So just, fun little things. And so I think the first time that I conceptualized that we were libertarians and that this was a political philosophy that was like distinct from other things was in 1996 because I was 9 years old and it was like the Clinton, Dole, Ross Perot and Harry Brown election. But of course, all the news and everything was like Clinton, Dole, Clinton, Dole. And so I was in the neighborhood, I saw all the signs of Clinton and Dole. And I asked my mother, like, which one were we voting for? And she's like, we're not voting for either of them. We're voting for Harry Brown. And I was like, okay, cool. All right. Harry Brown is our candidate. So, I'm like hanging out in the neighborhood, my friends talking about how their mother's voting for Clinton or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm voting for Harry Brown. He's going to be president. And I didn't know what the fuck that meant. Like, I just, I was like, that's, who my family's voting for. And that's, what, that's what we believe. And I think the first time I recognized contextually what we were was the day after the election. The like union leader, which is the newspaper in New Hampshire, like came out and and on the front page was like Clinton won. And then there was the vote totals in the top right corner. And I like never forget this. I can't remember what the numbers were, but I just remember that like the Clinton and Dole were in the millions, like tens of millions, like 30 million or something like that. And then like Harry Brown had like tens of thousands, like and I just looked at those numbers and I was like, oh, we're the losers. and it was just like it's a thing because what's funny is every libertarian has that experience, not of being surprised that they're the losers, but like also like hoping maybe this is the year, maybe we'll choose Johnson over like Clinton or Trump, and then like we don't, and like and every libertarian goes like maybe this is our year, and then we lose. And so every libertarian knows that feeling of like losing, right? And so that was like my first realization, like, oh, we're the losers. And so then I was kind of like, well, why do we believe this if it's losing philosophy, right? But I started kind of getting interested in the way that my mother talked about, what she believed. And it was weird because to me, it didn't even seem political. It just seemed like, this kind of life philosophy, this kind of like the way that we live our lives, like we don't fuck with other people and we're, just trying to do our best and like flourish and allow human flourishing. And I think the first time I got like engaged in the party and in politics myself was right after 9/11, because like I watched those towers get hit. It was like my mother immediately was like, this is going to be bad. Like there's going to be war. Like they're going to use this as lots of excuses to do a lot of shitty things. And she was completely right. And so I started doing like anti-war protesting. And in 2006, I ran for vice chair of the New Hampshire Libertarian Party. So that was my foray into like the leadership of, but like 2004, I worked on the Bednarik campaign. Like that was kind of like really like, because I mean 2001 I was 13, like during 9/11, and so like that was really kind of the time where I'd be like, Mom, can you bring me to this protest? Like, you know, like just trying to get my mother to drive me around, and then like getting a friend who was like older who would like bring me to things so that I didn't have to like ask my mother for a ride. So that, and then, you know, like once I had a car, I was like, I'm doing all this activism, and I became a crazy person doing a ton of activism.
That's awesome. So how much of that kind of stuff were you doing as a kid, like along with your parents? I know you said that they didn't really force you into too much of the libertarian activism stuff.
Well, what's funny is like, so my parents got divorced, and so I would do stuff with my mom mostly, and she would do like the state conventions sometimes, so I'd go to those, or like local kind of meetups or whatever. She had a lot of friends who we knew from like other contexts, like our religious community or anything else, who were also libertarian. And so it kind of like always kind of knew them, and like, oh, so-and-so is running for governor. How can we help? Like, so I did like a little bit of like kind of tagging along for like campaign things. And then I swear, like I joke all the time that in the 90s, like our version of political activism in like the 90s in libertarian circles was to just like go to a park, like, and like burn a UN flag. Like that's what I remember. Like I have very specific memories of being like, yeah, we're gonna like get together and like burn a UN flag. Like this is the kind of weird shit I remember. And like just people with like terrible dress sense and terrible social skills being like, yeah, we're showing them. And like, and I just remember being like I love these weird people because I grew up with them, but like also maybe there's a way for us to be like, not less weird, but like, you know, this doesn't have to be a philosophy that's just weird. Like, you know, like, and I just, it was funny because like, I'm sure we're going to get into this, but I swear, like, you know, libertarianism tends to attract a certain degree of disagreeable people, which makes absolute sense. But like watching all these people who like, you know, kind of stewed in their own disagreeableness, and then just being like, but like, the idea of everyone being free does not have to be like a controversial or disagreeable thing. Like, I think there's a real, like, I think this is a really pretty thing. Like, I think it can be packaged really well and sold really well. Why the hell do you guys have to be so like such assholes while you do it? Like, so it was funny.
It is a problem. We've held true to the disagreeable people with bad dress code. Like that stereotype, I don't know if we'll ever be able to kick it.
We've been doing better. We've been doing better. A little bit. No, okay. You don't know what it was like in the 90s. And then before that, okay? I think there was like a nice little fun. My mother talks about like how great it was when like Timothy Leary used to show up at the conventions. And I can just imagine like a bunch of libertarians on acid in like Denver, you know, like that would just be great. But you know, and I do my part to, you know, help facilitate that now. But the thing is like, I swear, the way that they were back in the 90s, there was them. It's funny nowadays. People are like, oh, we're so content. There's so much infighting, and I'm like, do you know what it was like? You know, it wasn't. It's never been like Ayn Rand, when like there were a bunch of people that were, you know, objectivists. Like my mother was in the objectivist circles, and you know, she'd go to see Ayn Rand speak, and there was a whole thing, and then she joined the LP. Ayn Rand was like, "You're all dead to me." And so suddenly, like all of the people who decided to join the LP, like the objectivists, like purged them from the objectivist movement. It's like, well, okay, cool. So like now we have like these groups that hate each other. Whoop, big whoop. Like you've never had Ayn Rand yelling at you about how you're no longer like, you know, an ally to liberty because you're a dirty right-wing hippie. Like, you know, it's always something, you know, like, you know, like there was like the anarchist thing in the 80s. Like there's just the party's always been full of contention. Like it's nothing new. It's just now we have social media, so more people see it. Yeah, which, you know, has its unfortunate characteristics there, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I find that really interesting about the rhetoric amongst a lot of the newer people, especially those brought in through the Mises Caucus, because like they have this idea that like they're taking on this like 50-year-old establishment that somehow like what they're fighting has been in the leadership since the beginning, and this is some like new thing, that some takeover is like a new idea that's never been done before, and they've flipped a couple dozen states or a dozen and a half states to Mises, and like that's some huge. It's like, bro, like 20 years ago, there was a radical, like, Ron Paul Revolution Reimagined caucus that came through and took over and purged all the loser pragmatists. This shit happened already in my lifetime, and it's gonna happen again before my lifetime's over. And y'all are just gonna keep with this back and forth and back and forth, and none of it's impressive.
Yeah. I mean, in 2008, I was part of, I had like a little, I think my most toxic period of time in the LP was probably like 2008. Cause I started to be like, well, like if only people would listen to me this way. And that's the biggest problem, right? Is everyone thinks like, if everyone just thought like me, then everything would be fine. And that's not how it works. It's just, that's not how it works. And so in 2008, I was not happy with Bob Barr being our nominee. So I basically led the LPNH in like a little like revolt, and we collected petitions for an additional presidential candidate. So we had 2 presidential candidates on the ballot for the LP. Like, yeah. So, I mean, I've been there, I've done it. I know what it's like. And, it's a waste of time and it's toxic. And, I mean, there's a certain amount of like involvement in inter-party politics that's just a waste of time. And so when I see people like really get all up in that shit, I'm like, all right, well, I'll be here, and I'll be here when you're bored. I'll be here when you're gone. I'll be here when you've gotten power and you realize that doesn't actually change anything. Because like, be the change you want to see in the world, but most of the things that people want to do as like leadership of the LP, they can already do. They don't need permission by being elected to something. You want to change the way that the LP messages their social media. In 2016, I reached out to somebody who was working in the LP social media, and I was like, hey, I just saw this thing. I think that it would be great if you guys posted about it. And they said, oh, thank you so much. And then they posted about it. And then at the convention, they were like, would you like to be a volunteer for the LP like Facebook group? And I was like, that would be wonderful. And so I was like, it just like show up and be like, hey, how can I help? And like, and also like read the room before running in with your ideas. Just read the room, see what people need, and then go, hey, I had some ideas. Can I run them by you? And people like, we want help. Everyone who's been here forever is fucking tired, and we want help. We want people, we want new blood. I want all the new blood. Like, come on in. But like, read the room, like know that we've fought a lot of these battles before, the anarchist versus minarchist thing. We've done that. And so instead of like turning your wheels on something, we've already been there and done that. Like we could actually like be using the new blood for productive effect, and I'm a big fan of productive effect.
Yeah, it would be nice to see more of it, and I can agree more with that sentiment of like, if only everyone listened to me, then it would be perfect. And it's funny because I've obviously not been in the party or the movement nearly as long as you have, but I'm coming up on like 6.5 years now, so I've had some fun and some ups and downs, and luckily I stayed pretty ignorant to a lot of the toxic bullshit for the first couple of years that I was in the party. I just kind of stuck to my little New York clique and didn't really meet anyone outside of New York, and didn't know any of the baggage. And I was in the party for a while before I learned about Bill Weld's gubernatorial race in New York and how he fucked us over there. And like,
ignorance really is bliss, isn't it?
It was, and I feel so bad for the people that are joining now. And the first thing that they do is like, they have a Twitter account, because like everyone has a Twitter account now, and like, so they go follow a bunch of people in the liberty movement on Twitter, and there's boom, they see all of the shit that's going on in the party all across the country. Like, there's civil wars going on in like a county party in fucking Wisconsin or something. I don't need to know about that. I don't need to know that the chair and the vice chair don't like each other. It doesn't fucking matter to me. And like, that's the crux of libertarianism, in my opinion, is like, there is nothing that could get me as a New Yorker to give a shit about Wisconsin, like, ever, in any way, shape, or form. Like, that's why I'm a libertarian, because I don't think that we should all be under the same system. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
That's right. I mean, and it's just like people also don't seem to recognize that like inter-party shit is like this tiny aspect of what like libertarians do, you know, like what libertarians are doing. Like there's, you know, campaigns all around the country. And like, I appreciate that. Like, okay, I've never watched your show before. Except that one episode that I told you about. I'm sorry. I just don't watch podcasts, but that one, like I saw before that one, you promoted a candidate who was running for office as an LPer. And then this one you did. And I'm like, there you go. Like just promote people who are doing something, volunteer to work with people who you like and who are doing something you like, and just like, you know, like stop fighting and just start like showing up and shoveling some shit, you know. Like we need people to like to do the work, and you know, we'll have plenty of opportunities to fight about things, but also when you're in person and you have a drink with somebody and you go, hey, I disagree with you about this, it tends to go a little bit easier. You know, there's a lot of people who I really don't enjoy on the internet, and I don't say anything about it, but I don't like, you know, there'll be somebody that I see online and I'll be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to ignore them. And then I get together with them in person, we have a drink, and I'm like, man, sometimes I disagree with your takes about something, but like, you're all right. And like, you know, there needs to be a little bit more of that and a little bit less like libertarian macho flash.
Yeah. I think back often to like 2019, which was really when I started to learn a lot of the bullshit and actually get more involved. I was in New Hampshire working for Tulsi Gabbard, and I was able to go to a Christmas party hosted by Nick Sarwark, where Jeremy Kaufman and his wife were in attendance, and just sit around and talk to people who now currently are like very controversial figures on the internet, and who I don't interact with really online as much as I can avoid. Honestly, both of them. I had Kaufman on the show to talk about Odysee and stuff, but I don't touch his Twitter for a reason. And Nick has almost completely burned that bridge. And it was such a better time when we were all just hanging out, drinking some homemade eggnog, talking about Free State Project bullshit, and having a good time. Twitter, I think, is the worst thing to ever happen to the liberty movement.
I like to say that no, but yeah, probably. I don't know. It's a mixed bag. There have been great things that have happened because of Twitter. There are terrible things that have happened because of Twitter. It is what it is. It's another platform, and that's the thing, is that all of these things, like, we can make them how we like we're the content producers, right? So we can make it whatever we want to make it. And some people choose to make it a toxic environment, and some people choose to make it an environment where they uplift each other. I feel bad because I don't spend enough time on Twitter. So like, I show up on Twitter and like, I'll go, oh, I have some notifications, and I just the format of it, I'm very wordy. Like, I'm a loquacious human being. Like, Twitter does not work well for me. But I will see like some, like, people be like, Friday follow your fellow libertarians, and people always include me in these lists, and I'm like, oh, I don't even post that much here, but thank you. I love that we like amplify each other, and I see some of the other names and I'm like, yeah, no, I like that person a lot. I'm so glad they're being amplified. But then I'm also like, maybe the people like me because I don't post. Like, I post about things, but I don't post about other things. Like, I'll be like, oh, is there a dumpster fire over there? I'm not going to call attention to that dumpster fire over there. Instead, hey, what's something fun that's been happening? Let's talk about something cool. Like, let's talk about something happy. Like, what's good in the world? What's good in yours?
And it's great because I think Liberty Twitter is a big enough yet small enough circle of people that when you try to do something like that, it's actually not that difficult to change like the vibe of the day on the internet. If you post something happy and fun that gets engagement and gets people talking about something else, and some like meme contest is started or something like that. Like, I've seen Spike do that a couple of times where, you know, there's a dumpster fire going on Twitter and everyone's engaged on this one topic and everyone's subtweeting everyone, and there's thousands of threads about this same one argument, and then all of a sudden a meme contest pops up out of nowhere, and then that's all anybody's talking about or caring about, because it's so much more fun than shitting on some random person because they had a bad take. And at the end of the day, we all have bad takes sometimes. Like, we can be a little bit more gracious.
Well, and debate in general is just such a, like, debate is good. It hashes things out. It like helps us develop our opinions about things. but so many people treat every interaction like it needs to be a fucking debate and you need to win. And like, and the thing is, like, winning is like, what? Okay, so you've humiliated your opponent, your ideological opponent about this thing, or, oh, somebody said something wrong, so you're gonna shit all over them, like retweet them, subtweet them, requote them, whatever the fuck. You know, I don't even know all the terminology on Twitter because I'm an old lady. But like but the thing is, like, you'll see everyone like fighting, and it's like, well, what's the goal here? Like, is the goal to get, you know, person A to be like, I'm so sorry, I said the wrong thing. Like, one, people have a like you should understand this from basic psychology and basic sales. Is like, people have a desire to save face. And so when you back them into a corner, like, one, they're going to double down, and two, like, you know, they can't, they like, it's not good, like, for their psyche to just like be fighting until they like, till what? Either they submit or they just fight harder. And it's like, instead, like, just kind of approach it with like, hey, you know, didn't like your take on that, or hey, I think that there was another way to say that. And I think, like, there's a way to like further a discussion about the best way to say something that doesn't have to be like, yeah, well, I own the libs, motherfucker. Like, there's so many like ways to not like fuck each other up. Sorry, like, it just drives me nuts. Like,
no, I'm with you. And I think there's two different styles of debating, and I think the less productive one is most common, because you have the one where you're actually trying to debate to change that person's opinion, and I feel like that is very actually rare. The other, most of the time, what we're doing is debating to try to win over the audience of whoever's watching, whether it's a like podcast version debate or a Twitter argument. The goal in people's minds is that, oh, someone's going to see me own this lib who is a lib, and they're going to have their minds changed. And sometimes that's a real thing, and sometimes that's useful. And I've seen it be useful, especially like during campaign season. Like, you know, I partook in very many Twitter debates about like Joe Jorgensen versus Joe Biden, right? Like, that's something that I did, and I know that I changed some people's minds in the comments of various Twitter threads during the election. But if you're arguing with libertarians on Liberty Twitter and both of you only have like 300 followers or less, the entirety of your audience is already libertarian. And most of them think you're both morons, most likely. And you're like, there is no audience to be winning over. Like, the entire idea that you are doing something useful by arguing with another libertarian that no one's ever heard of, it's just non-existent. It's not useful. Now, if you're going after some like verified checkmark and like tearing them down, and you're getting some engagement out of it, and you're showing like the military industrial complex out to be the bullshit that it is or something, that's great. Keep doing that.
I also, it's like, you know, what are you showing people when they're like when there's the audience and they are observing something, you know, what are you showing them? You can be like, all right, I'm going to attack this person, right? So that person, one, it's like, you know, two people debating, you know, they're probably not going to convince each other. But then, like, what is the audience learning about you in this situation? And so, like, there are times that I'm debating somebody, and like, I mean, like, I'll debate on abortion issues. Like, that's a big one for me. And so, like, I'll be debating about abortion, and like, I will be cognizant of the fact that, like, I'm not going to change the mind of the person that I'm debating with. And there's going to be a whole lot of like anti-choice people, pro-life people, whatever, who are going to, you know, be on their side, who are going to hate me, right? But I will go, okay, like, how can I express myself in a way that like helps my audience that's pro-choice, like, see better arguments for this, right? But then how can I make the audience there understand that actually like, how can I make them understand that, you know, that I have a point, even if I don't get them to like agree with the point? Like, how do I get them to like see me as like not some like evil baby killer, right? Like, what am I showing them? Can I show them that I'm compassionate? Can I show them that I care? Can I show them that I value children? Can I show them these things while also like articulating this position so that they can see like less of a demon on the other side, you know? And I feel like there are like, that's a topic that I get super debatey about. And then there's all these other places where I don't debate people because I'm also like, I'm not, I told you to talk, let's talk about this, but like how many times I watch people get into a debate when no debate was necessary at all.
Oh, yes. Oh, all too often. And yet that actually is a great lead into what was my next question. Because you have been branded by people on the internet the most agreeable libertarian, which you said, you showed me that post from last week. So I'm wondering, how do you approach disagreements in a positive way that can earn you such a title?
Well, so the first thing is that like, as that post showed you, and what I mentioned earlier a little bit, is the idea that like, of course, libertarians tend to be disagreeable. You know, most libertarians come from an environment where like they had to kind of like check all their premises and like and disagree with everything that was around them, and like and change from a political philosophy presented to them by their parents or their community or whatever. And so it totally makes sense that you would have some like resilience of disagreeableness, and like, and that's a value, right? Like to be able to disagree in like a room full of people taking a very immoral position. But I also find that like I have the ability, I will stand up in a room full of libertarians, full of non-libertarians, and I will say, hey, I don't think that's right. And I'm more than capable of doing that. But part of it is that like, I really like people, and I really want them to like understand my philosophy. And like, and so the reason that like this came up for me recently was I know this libertarian who posted on Twitter to say that the only downside to lockdowns and stuff ending is that there were going to be more social events. And so it was like more opportunities for them to meet people and for those people to hate them because they're a libertarian. And I was like, what are you doing in like regular social interactions, like at a party or something, where like people learn that you're a libertarian and then hate you? Like, what are you doing? Because for me, like I live in Los Angeles. I'm surrounded by people that do not share my political philosophy. We often share specific political like ideals in unison. Like, I'm part of the decrim psilocybin movement here. I work in the weed industry. All of this is stuff that like I can connect with people over drugs, even if they're the bluest Democrat ever, or they're the most Antifa leftist. Like, we're like, yay, drugs, right? We can bond over that, and I can talk to Republicans, and we can talk about business. Like, I have things, and so that's the things I love to find the ways I can connect with people. So, I'll be at a social event, and I host parties in my house. Like, I have like probably on average like 2 events a month. I've usually got over 100 people here. And before COVID, I would usually have like 2 to 3 events a month, and usually like an average of anywhere from 100 to 300 people in my house. Like, I'm so used to having people who don't know anything about my political beliefs, and I'm never going to hide them. But I just like, I'm having a social, like I'm in a social interaction with somebody. And especially now it comes up because people talk about COVID, or people talk about, education, or what's going on, in the world, that they're upset about what, Biden's doing, or what, Trump did, or whatever. And I just like, one, I listen. And 2, I try to connect over something that's not politics. So when I meet someone, I'm like, hi, how are you? What brings you to this party? Like, oh, you've got kids? Tell me about them. Like, things, like human being things. Like, let's fucking talk about something that's like, what's your life? Because as a libertarian, I love people. I want you to be able to live your life the best way you can and to flourish in that life. And that's not about like politics. That's like, what's your thing? Your kids, your job, your passions. You like hiking. I want you to do those things. I want you to flourish while you do them. And so I want to know what those things are. And so here I go, and I like connect with someone over their thing. And then maybe what happens is they go like, oh yeah, like I've got these kids, and I go, oh my God, I love those ages. They're great. You just connect over some shit. Right. And then they say something about like their child's school, and they'll be like, yeah, it's just a shame this is going on, or whatever. And I'll find that even like the most Democrat person is really upset with something the public schools are doing. Right. And I'll just be like, man, that must be really hard. I don't sit there and go like public schools are evil. I'll just be like, man, that sounds like that's really hard. Like, how are you dealing with that? Like, and I just find the places where we connect first, right? And then they'll say something. They'll be like, yeah, well, health insurance would just be solved if like we just had universal health care. And I'll be like, yeah, I don't know. Like, that's my favorite thing to say, is like when someone's like adamant about something, I just go like, yeah, I don't know. And they're just confused for a second because I didn't go like, no, like the worst thing to do is like government involvement. No, I just go like, I don't know. I mean, I've seen a lot of problems with that kind of a system. And I mean, but hey, I agree with you that the system currently is totally fucked up. And I think that's something that libertarians suck at doing, is like agreeing with people about something that's totally true. We all agree that the system's fucked up. What the hell is going on? I'm trying to buy like a new health insurance right now, and my premiums are insane. And I'm like, what? Like, this is fucked up. And my friends are like, that's why universal healthcare is so great. And I'm like, no, but I get it. I get why you would think that. And so let's have a conversation about that. So I like to go like, yeah, I don't know about that. And then I just share another perspective. And so the way that I like to do it is, instead of debating someone, I'm at a fucking party. We have cocktails in our hands. Why are we arguing? What I say is like, I like to say that I'm comparing notes, as I'm like, you know what? I mean, my experiences show me this. And then I kind of bring up a couple things and I like ask them their experiences. And then I just like let it trail to like, you know, like see where the conversation naturally goes. But like, if people get heated about it, I go, hey, you know, I think there's a lot of things to think about here, you know. Oh, also, oh, look, they're bringing up the appetizers, you know, like change, like really like put seeds of doubt in people, and then and then let them kind of comfortably like explore that idea themselves, you know. Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, she said this, that makes a lot of sense. And then like maybe the next time we talk, they're a little more primed for that. And they're like, oh, you know, I was thinking about what you said last time and I wanted to know more about that. And so a lot of people just like, they end up engaging with me a little bit. Then I back off, but I do so like really like, hey, you know, I'm not saying I agree with you that you won, because we didn't have a debate where we win or lose. I just like, yeah, I think I have a different perspective on that. But, you know, I appreciate that you've got one yourself. And then people friend me on Facebook, and then they go like, oh, wow, she has some opinions. But then they just listen, right? They just listen, they look, and they go like, oh, well, this is this girl. I totally connected with her over like psychedelics and her love of parrots and Jeff Goldblum and Burning Man. And now I see that she's like into this liberty thing. Like, she just talked about guns. Like, guns are bad. And then they're like, oh, but she just made a really interesting argument about self-defense, because yeah, like as 100-pound female, if she's like walking through an alley, like a gun is her best chance to like stop a guy from, you know, raping her. Oh, that's a really interesting argument. I hadn't thought about it that way. And I like this human being because, one, they didn't try to fucking shout me down at a party. And two, we connected over our mutual love of Jeff Goldblum, birds, and Burning Man. Like, you know, like, yeah, fine, connect with people. And then you have these opportunities to like, people are so forgiving and give so much credit to people that they like. You see it all the time in our political discussions. Like, people give credit to, you know, they're always like, oh, Obama didn't mean to say that. Why do they say that? They like Obama. So they're willing to like apologize for that stuff all the time. And it happens in libertarian circles, you know, oh, I'm sure so-and-so didn't mean to say that, you know. Like, they give people so much credit all the time. And I constantly on Facebook, I'm accused of giving people way too much credit. And sometimes I give credit to assholes. I'll be like, okay, this person's a total dick, but maybe they had a point. Maybe they meant this. And people are so weirded out by it. But it's like, you know, like, I'm just going to treat everyone like they're my friend. And then, you know, like, if they're not going to be my friend, then they have to be the asshole. Just, you know, concept.
I dig that. Yeah, so there's so many great things that you said there. No, you're good.
Oh my God, I'm sorry.
I just tried to like compile my thoughts on how to respond, because there were so many like really great points that you made there. But I had a really awesome conversation on Monday night. I got to go on Muddied Waters Media with Jason Lyon. And we were talking about like the actual like praxis and life philosophy of liberty versus just like the political ideology. And I think that me being raised in a very religious household and like very on with like apologetics and evangelism and those kinds of skill sets definitely put me in the right mind or headspace to do what I do now, because it teaches you that like slow, methodical, like just be a Christian and someone's friend and just like grow that connection, and then eventually they'll come to you and be like, why are you different? What do you believe? And like that's what you learn as a Christian growing up. And I'm not religious anymore, but I still like, I'm so glad that I have that foundation, because bringing that into the liberty movement, I'm able to take a year to take someone from like maybe the duopoly's kind of iffy, I don't know how much I like that, to posting super base takes about the tourists on January 6th. And it was like I speaking specifically of one friend that I got to meet last year, but she was a member of the Unity 2020 movement and just kind of like just starting to break away from the duopoly. Now she's like an extremely based, almost anarchist, because we had 30-40 conversations stretched out over a year and slowly broke that down. And I've had the wonderful opportunity to do that with a lot of people at this point. But you're never going to make somebody a libertarian in one conversation, like ever. There are way too many weird, fucked up, crazy, convoluted pieces to our ideology to ever get someone to go from, the war on drugs is bad to like, the but my roads argument is going to come up every time. Everyone has to get over that hump. Like everyone's going to bring it up. Everyone's going to throw that objection out there. Everyone has to get over, how do we build roads without government? And you're not going to be able to do that in the same conversation that you convince them that we're better on cannabis decrim than the Democrats. Like, it's never going to be the same convo.
Agreed. And it's interesting because like also like I'm very suspicious when somebody is like, oh yeah, I had the nap explained to me and then I just converted. And it's like, well, okay, all right. I welcome our robot overlords, but what? It's like, cool. I'm so glad that you exchanged your programming for a new kind of programming. But it concerns me because there's a number of people that I've seen that have gone like really like hard, like they're hardline anarchists. And then they're suddenly not. And it's like, oh, surprise. But also like, that's the thing is like, there's a lot of people that will have their reasons that they can't get full in on libertarianism. And, it'll be like why they can't vote for, well, what's funny is a friend of mine, my hard left friend, super fucking Antifa left friend. She and I have been friends since we were kids. And we have conversations all the time about politics. And she's like, I just don't understand the capitalism thing. But like, I also see that there's a lot of things libertarians get right. And so, she's respectful about it. And I don't sit there trying to convert her, but we have little discussions about free market econ and stuff like that. And she's really worried about like in a libertarian society, like what will the people who are disabled and can't take care of themselves, what will they do? And what will the poor do? If all the corporations can just own all the streets or whatever, terrifying, thing that she's thought of about capitalism. But what's funny is she loved my speech that I gave for nominating Vermin Supreme in 2020. I don't know if you saw that, but it was a nice little thing like, hey, here's this opportunity. We could nominate Vermin Supreme as our candidate. And at the end of the day, she decided to write him in. Like, she was like, she didn't want, like, she's a California, lefty, like left. And Vermin definitely appeals to the left, but like she voted for president for somebody who was like a libertarian primary candidate, and
that's awesome.
And when I talk to her, I'm like, look, like I understand that you are very afraid of there being no social safety net. I totally get it. And but the social safety net is like 15% of the federal budget. So like, how do we feel about the 85% of the federal budget that isn't the social safety net? And she's like, yeah, get rid of it all. And I'm like, yeah. So like, we have this agreement. We agree that the military industrial complex is fucking like crazy. And like, we agree about like corporate welfare and we agree about all of these things. And so we have these lovely like conversations where we're like 85% in agreement. And I'm like, look, if you'll work with me to bring down that, I will totally like, I will hear you out about the other stuff. You know what I mean? I don't think I don't believe that taxation is okay in any, but like, but hell, like look at how much we can agree and work together. And I feel that way about almost everybody. Like I will find the thing that I can agree with you with and work with you on, and let's do it. And then, you know, there will be places where I'll be like, I'm sorry, can't be there for that. That I do not agree with, that I'm not okay with. But like, there's so many places to agree. And over time, I've just watched her like convert on things I didn't even talk to her about. And she's like, I saw a post you made and I'm with you on that one now. And I'm like, awesome. Like, thank you. Look at that. We're just slowly coming along. And I get messages like weekly from people being like, hey, you know, I'm not 100% sold, but the Libertarian Party reflects me more than any other political party. So I'm in. Thank you for what you've done to like show me that. And I'm like, awesome. Yeah, like I don't need 100% conversion. Like that's creepy.
Yeah, that would that's like entering cult level statistics if you're that good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the best things that ever happened for like my mental health when it comes to politics and all of this arguing and stuff was like the fundamental realization of what the left means when they say capitalism. Like when they're and just the drastic difference in definition than what a libertarian means when they say the word capitalism. And we're not even talking about the same system. We're not talking about any of the same things. And pretty much everything that a leftist hates about capitalism, libertarians agree with their critique on. Like, and I would spend a little too much time on Clubhouse lately and have gotten into these kinds of debates a lot. And, you know, I arguing with a communist who's like throwing up all of the worst parts of like crony capitalism and corporatism and literally fascism is what they're describing. And they're like, these are the problems with capitalism. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not going to defend capitalism because it's a word and I don't actually care about it. I'm going to just agree with you on your critiques because everyone in this room, because I was with 5 or 6 other libertarians who I was having to like keep down and like mute their microphones and like heavily moderate the room to keep them from losing their shit because they just heard somebody insult the glorious capitalism. And it's like, no, they're talking about corporate bailouts. We also hate corporate bailouts. Like, let's talk about why corporate bailouts are bad and why like no one wants them and how to get rid of them. Let's not argue over semantics. And so like really understanding what people mean when they say things like capitalism and socialism and communism was like a huge weight off and just so much better for my, like I said, my mental health, literally, of just not getting defensive, because I think that that's something that really triggers libertarians. We feel like we're getting attacked if someone shits on capitalism, and it's we need to like detach from that word, start using like free market more or something. I don't know. I'm a firm believer that we should just let that word kind of die off. It's too contentious.
I get it. It's funny. There's Gary Chartier talks about markets, not capitalism. It's a book that's really good, and he's got a couple articles about that. And I love like what capitalism is supposed to be, and it just makes me so mad that like, okay, maybe we should just get rid of the word. And I feel this way about libertarianism. Is like I know that lots of people hate the word libertarianism and they think it means something else, and I'm like, this is my word, like fuck off, like. And so, you know, but I try not to be defensive about it to the point where, oh my god, like every once in a while, like I hear, you know, I host a bunch of events, and so I'll be hosting like there's a whole like psychedelic industry happening here in California. And so we'll have like a whole event and there will be a lot of people here. And I think I just got back from Freedom Fest. So like we host an event and somebody was talking to me and I said something about how I had just been in South Dakota, and they were like, oh, what were you doing in South Dakota? And I was like, oh, I was at this conference. And they're like, what kind of a conference? And I'm like looking at this person realizing like, oh, you are like super left. If I'm like Freedom Fest, a conference full of libertarians and whatever. Like I thought about it for a second and I was like, well, it's a conference called Freedom Fest. It's in South Dakota. And it's it's a really interesting event. It's a really big, like there's a lot of diverse viewpoints, but at the end of the day, you know, it's a lot of us are working to try to make the world as free as possible. And like, I just started there and they're like, oh, well, that sounds nice. Like, you know, that's how can you argue with that? Like how to make the world as free as possible. And like, and then and they were like, oh, what did you talk about there? And I was like, well, I talked about, and what's funny is I actually like added in things I didn't talk about that time, but I knew would like benefit them. And I've at Freedom Fest, I've spoken about drug decrim. I've talked about millennials. I've talked about all sorts of subjects at Freedom Fest prior. So this one, I was like, well, I talked about like feminism, and I talked about like women in political movements in general, and you know, third party politics, and you know, just kind of and having conversations about the way we all look at the world. Like that's the vaguest answer ever, but as a result, like they were like, oh, that's really cool, and then we just kind of like gently started probing on those topics in a really nice way that kind of made them go like, oh, cool, that sounds awesome. I'm like super into that. And like, you just like, later I can say the word libertarian. I like later in the night, you know, somebody said something, like somebody else came over who knows me and was like, how's my little libertarian doing? Like, and like by at that point, the person knew me and she was like, oh yeah, she fights to make the world as free as it can be. Like, you know, like she didn't get triggered by that word because she didn't hear it first, you know? And so I can respect the fact that like people get a little bit like dodgy about certain words. And I'm like, okay, like I'm here. I'm going to tell, like at the end of the day, I will go, yep, I'm a libertarian. And I love to do it in context where like everyone agrees and everyone's like saying a thing and they're like, oh my God, those crazy like libertarians, whatever. Like, well, I mean, I'm one of those crazy libertarians. I love to say it like that. I'm just one of those crazy libertarians. And sometimes I will defend something that like is like quintessentially libertarian. Like there's a lot of like memes about libertarians defending, and I'll be like, yep, I'm going to be here to do that. And I will pretend I'm like a bit embarrassed about it because I'm not like, you know, it's just kind of this playful kind of like, yeah, I'll be the evil capitalist for a second and say that I don't care how much money Jeff Bezos has, like, and I'll do it in this kind of playful way, and people will be like, really? And I'll be like, yeah, I mean, it'd be cool if he spends it on things that I like, but he already does because Amazon's pretty rad. I buy a lot on Amazon. Like, and people don't know how to respond to that except to go, I buy a lot on Amazon too. And I'm like, great, it's wonderful that he produces such value for both of us.
Oof, that's gotta like hurt them to the core of their souls.
I mean, but it's funny because they'll just be like, well, I mean, like, what's the issue? Because yeah, I mean, there are things to talk about. You know, it'd be cool if like there are people who complain about the working conditions at Amazon or at SpaceX if you're going to talk about Elon Musk. But like, I love to just kind of be like, yeah, but I mean, look at these things that are good, right? Like, you know, it kind of makes sense. I mean, I'm glad that like all the money in the world isn't held by like monarchies anymore. Isn't that cool? I like that better, you know, like, you know, I prefer that it be some famous, you know, some entrepreneur that can get knocked down a peg by the fact that their product is no longer useful. You know, like what's Tom from MySpace doing now?
He abandoned us. That's what he's doing.
He did. He was all of our friends, and now he's gone.
Yeah, you know, that's a really good point that like about, you know, that it's better Jeff Bezos than like the king and queen of Spain or whatever. Definitely we're trending in the right direction. And honestly, that's a topic that I like bringing up because I actually don't use Amazon. Like I've never spent a single penny on Amazon ever. Mostly because I just hate shopping online in general. I don't do it, and I don't stay put long enough to like get deliveries timely. Fair. And I'm way too impatient. Like if the money is going to exit my account, I want the product to enter my hands very shortly thereafter. Yeah. I am way too fucking impatient for online shopping. So it made it really easy for me. But then I just kind of like got grounded in this like really philosophical like boycott of Amazon, and I'm stuck to it. And it's not terribly difficult. But it is really funny for me to like talk to a leftist who's like, capitalists are evil, Jeff Bezos is blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, but you spend a quarter of your paycheck making him successful. Yeah. Meanwhile, me, who's defending his existence, doesn't. Like, yeah. I'm actively doing everything that I can do in my life to make him not successful anymore. Like, I would love it if everyone just stopped using Amazon and Jeff Bezos was like poor and destitute or whatever, because like he has had some really shitty business practices, and like if that's something you care about, don't shop there. And same with Walmart or Target or any of these other stores that people want to shit on. It's like, all right, then shop local. Go to your local diner, not McDonald's. Go to the farmer's market instead of Price Chopper or Kroger. Like, it's not as difficult as people make it out to be to just change the way that they live life and vote with their dollars and actually do the thing. But everyone wants to like still cling to the convenience of life, even if they claim to hate capitalism. They really love the convenience that it provides.
Yeah, I go with I defend Jeff Bezos, and I just did my annual. I was like, how much did I spend last year on Amazon? And I was like, I spent like $8,000 on Amazon last year. Like, but I also run a business. And so like, and what's funny is I don't even buy most of the things for the business, but if I'm like, oh shit, I need these, I need packages or I need these items, whatever, I look like Amazon's a really cheap place to get that unless I'm feeling like waiting for Alibaba. But it's funny because like, I'm the person who's like, hey, we all have this sin and I'm the only one not embarrassed about it. Like,
that's probably a much better like bridge building than my holier than thou ranting that I usually end up on.
It's still like what you say is like, that's totally valid though. It's like, where, why are you spending your money there then? Like, and it's just, it's a fascinating thing. Cause I'm a big fan of, like, okay, cool. Like, maybe Jeff Bezos isn't our favorite, or maybe Elon Musk isn't our favorite person to be the richest person in the world. But like, what do we want the richest people in the world to be? Like, who, like, when you think about it, it's like someone's going to be rich, right? Like, like I like the idea that it's somebody who has to create immense value for everyone. Like, would I prefer that the richest person be a queen of England? Do I prefer that they be Kanye West, who, like a celebrity of some kind? Like, it kind of works. It's like, cool. Like, and also like Elon Musk's money is like, it'll evaporate in a second if he doesn't do what he's, like if his thing doesn't come to fruition, because his wealth is really built in speculation. But like, but it's like, Amazon changed the way that a lot of people like, are able to live. And like for people who don't have cars to be able to like get their things delivered, like it's like created tremendous value for a lot of people. And like, so why wouldn't the richest person in the world be somebody who's created tremendous value for a bunch of people? Like, and I'm a big fan of that, like conceptualization of capitalism or free markets is like, capitalism is the idea that we get wealthy by serving one another. And like, that's such an incredible thing to think about, is it's like, what better way to be wealthy? Like what, like, isn't it incredible that like I can make money by helping you? And that's what I love. Like, that's what I love about like liberty and free market econ in general. And like, and why I try not to get like too bogged down in like LP shit, because like I will support my candidates. I will show up and collect petitions. I will do all the things, but like, I'm not engaging in zero sum games about who should be chair or who should be in charge of what, because like, my entire philosophy is about like avoiding zero sum games as much as possible. Every human interaction should be mutually beneficial. And like, that's a market. Like my interaction with you should be beneficial. Like you have given me a platform to talk to people and I've gotten to know you better. And you like you are entertained by what I have to say and you think it's interesting and like it helps engage you, right? Like that is value, right? And so we have just exchanged value and it's great. And we both come off like happier for it, right? And every single interaction in our life should be like that. Whether it's, the business that we're doing, like cool, like I work for a person and like I make money and they get my labor, like, yay. Like I want us all to like exchange things we're willing to give for things we want to get. And like, that's exactly what I want to do. And that's like my entire life philosophy about like how I engage in the world, what things I really spend my time on. Like I'm building a company with my partner, I like, that's what I want to do. And I want to put my money where my mouth is and put my philosophy where my money is. And so to say, I believe in this, so this is what I'm doing, like to make that happen. And like, I can believe in libertarianism all I want, but like engaging in the LPs, like bullshit is like, okay, that's a zero sum game that I don't want to like, I don't believe in it. like that. There's people come away unhappy from that situation. How can we like have exchanges where we come off better? Like campsite rules. Like I show up and it's better than when I found it. Like that's every single person should look at every single thing in their lives and like make it better.
Amen. I couldn't have said that better myself. Yeah, I love that you came to the realization that the LP bullshit is bullshit a little bit faster than I did. I actually just resigned from all of my committee seats and campaigns and everything last week, which was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Just
so
be
relieving,
like,
right?
Yeah, so relieving.
It's like
And it's even making like Twitter better because so many arguments and things that I'm just like, I don't care. I don't care. You guys can argue about this. I give zero fucks. Like, you guys want to argue about who should or shouldn't be the next chair or vice chair of the LNC. I don't believe that anything federal should exist, including the National Party. Like, I don't believe in anything that tries to rule over all 50 states, abolish the entire federal government, and then we won't need the LNC anymore. So, like, we should all be in the same on the same mission there. And yeah, it's so great.
Exactly.
But honestly, like, I think the last probably year or so, I've gotten to know and see a lot more people who do work outside of the party, or kind of are in a position similar to yourself, where you're there and you're still a big L. You're not like anti-libertarian, like one of those people, but you're not like super engaged, spending all of your time on LP stuff. And the more people that I got to meet and know like that, the more I realized how much more work and how much more good they've done in the last couple of years than I have, putting all of my time and energy into the LP. And not even like in a sad way. Like, I'm glad that I did all of the work that I did, and I'm happy for the connections that I've made and stuff like that. But like, at the end of the day, talking to someone from like Michael Bolden from the 10th Amendment Center about like the work that him and his spin-off organizations have been able to do, and like they might be about to completely nullify like every federal gun law in the state of Missouri next month, is like a thing that might happen. That's so much cooler, so much better. So many more lives are becoming tangibly freer because of that than me getting 3.2% in a New York City Council race in 2019. Like, it's just, there's such a drastic difference in like the tangible good that's coming out of some of this, some of the work, rather than just arguing over, like you said, zero-sum games within the party. And our mutual friend Livy definitely helped kick me in the ass in that a lot. Last year we got into a lot of acid and Molly induced arguments over whether or not the LP was valid, because she was trying to convince me it wasn't, and I was still like gung-ho, like, no, we can fix the party, we can make it a thing, it's gonna be serious, it's gonna be legitimate, we can win the presidency by 2028. No.
You sweet summer child. Oh, you sweet summer child. You have not lived through the great winters, but winter is coming.
Yeah. I constantly say that joining, like getting really active in the LP and joining my state committee was what made me switch from being a libertarian to an anarchist, because I realized even if we elected a bunch of libertarians, they still wouldn't have a clue what the fuck they were doing, and it would still be a shit show. So we're gonna go over here, do anarchy instead.
Well, it's to be fair, it's like I love supporting my fellow libertarians when they're doing, like, you run for office, like, okay, running for office, like for political office, not within the LP, but like, I like, there's what was it, like, how many people did Pennsylvania recently elect? Like a whole, like, they just like it's fucking ridiculous. They targeted races, they elected people, and that's good. Like, I encourage that, right? And I think that like on the lower level of things, like on winnable elections, right? That kind of stuff. You got to look at like, okay, wow, like you can be a Republican, you can be a libertarian running against a Democrat or a Republican where the other side didn't show up, and like you can actually do pretty well. We have that sometimes happen in California, which is great. We've got elected people in California, which everybody seems surprised by because, ooh, California. But like So like people are always like, why do you live in California? I'm like, look, okay, I have beautiful weather and I live in Los Angeles. So you know what's great? Like there are too many people here for the government here to give a shit about me. It's pretty great.
Right.
Like, and so there's a great quote from The Great Gatsby where there's this character says to another character at like one of Gatsby's parties, they say, I love big parties because it's the only place you can get any privacy. And I feel that way about LA as I feel like I live in Los Angeles and I get privacy because I'm not a celebrity and I'm not a criminal. Like those are, I mean, fuck, I am a criminal. I am not like a dangerous criminal, like doing something that like the California thinks I need to, you know, stop. You know, I'm not somebody like going out and racing cars in a way that's like dangerous or whatever. I'm doing like
you're
like
racing cars in the safe way.
Right. I'm like, you know, the things that I'm doing don't seem to influence like public, whatever, you know, it's not a big like macho flash of attention of what I'm doing. And then there's also like, there's celebrities and there's, you know, rich people and whatever, like I'm a nobody, you know? And so I'm this nobody that like, that gets away with a lot because like, no, like who cares? Like, who cares what I'm doing, you know? And so, I think it's fun. Like before, there used to be like a lot of regulations around like how much cannabis someone can possess and like what they can do with it. And like my partner and I, so my partner Judd Weiss, he and I started throwing events with bud bars. Like we have literal like bartenders serving like weed, and we started doing these bud bars at every event. So you're serving alcohol, you're serving weed, and like that was like kind of like not entirely legal at the time. Like it was just kind of like, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to have that much weed to be able to like provide for a party of 300 people. But like, fuck it, we did it. And like, it's just this thing. It just normalizes the idea that you show up at a party and you can be like, do I want a vodka Sprite or do I want, you know, do I want a joint? Oh, cool. I can have both. Like, yeah. And so we do a lot of that kind of stuff. And so, you know, it's like normalize these things that now it's perfectly legal to do that here. But like, but it's interesting because like prior to that, it was just this thing where we're like, oh, this will be legal and it's not a big deal. And like people should learn that this is okay. And so now, I mean, when I throw events, I now like hand out the optional microdose mushroom tea. And like, psilocybin mushrooms are not decriminalized here, but like whatever, like it's just like it's now in a tea. It's these tiny quantities. People show up, they have it, and then it's gone. So it's like whatever. Like nobody cares, and like these little things of like just kind of normalizing this like delightful thing. It's not even. I don't even think about it as like civil disobedience, even though it totally is. It's just like, hey, like, do you want to enjoy this thing? Here. Like, and people go, oh, that's wonderful. And so I host like all these psilocybin mixers because we're working on a decrim psilocybin initiative on the ballot for this fall. And I'm deeply embedded in the psychedelic space because I know all of these mushroom growers. So I know mushroom growers. I know people who are like, you know, trying out all these different, you know, like psychedelics here in California. And, you know, I'm facilitating them meeting each other so that they can trade drugs. Like I'm facilitating, you know, other people meeting them so that they can buy and sell those drugs. And I'm just like, hey, like come and hang out. Like everybody show up and like talk about your thing with each other. This is a trustworthy crowd. And then we have a good time. And I'm starting a business that's around it. So I've been in the cannabis industry for 5 years. And then I'm working on, now that I've talked to enough people, 1, psilocybin will be decriminalized soon in California. And 2, it's interesting to find out what's needed to grow those. And so by learning everything I could about like how these people grow it, I was able to like, I'm working with people to create like a product that like doesn't have any of the genetics that are illegal, but like here is like a kit to like perfectly grow your own mushrooms. And all you need to do is like add your genetics and then you can grow your own, which like honors the fact that I believe strongly in decentralization. I believe that everyone should be able to access their own fucking drugs. And I want to facilitate people having more access to psychedelics so they can change their minds and change their lives. And so I'm like doing a capitalism thing. I'm like, I'm starting a company in which you are going to purchase this item from me. And it's going to be like, you know, all packaged and sold. And I have investors and all sorts of things. It's a very like legitimate legal business enterprise. and it's facilitating all of my libertarian beliefs about decentralization and access to drugs and decriminalization. And like that's what I like to do, is like find the ways to like do liberty like without fighting these stupid zero-sum games. Like don't waste people's time, don't waste people's resources, like make something. And so if if you're gonna support candidates who are running for president or like governor or like senate, like things you can't win, like we know we can't win them. I'm sorry about your recent like discovery that that's the case, but the fact is like the system is rigged against us, and we aren't going to win by playing by their rules. And so the only thing that you can win in that moment is hearts and minds of people, and you do that by showing them like when you pick your candidate for president or for president or for governor or for senate, like show people like what liberty can mean to them in inspirational messaging. Like bold messaging, fine, but inspirational messaging. Teach people something about liberty that is beautiful and serving and wonderful and makes them makes them feel empowered. And like do that with your candidates who are running for president or running for governor, or running for senate. And like we're not going to win, but we're going to win something. We win the hearts and the minds of people who go, wow, that's a great idea. And then, you know, I believe I have this thing I say at Anarchapulco whenever I speak there, where I say, I don't believe in the abolition of government. I believe in its obsolescence. And like everything that I do in libertarianism is to create, like, let's show the world what we can create that makes it so that like no one would opt for the government solution because everything else is better. That was another like dumb phrase. Sorry, I'm like just info dumping at you. Here you go. It's my concepts.
Still not as bad as Dan Fishman.
Brought to you by Canada Dry.
I hope Dan isn't watching that. I love you, Dan. You're a great guest, and it was a great episode. But yeah, no, I love that last bit, and I wrote down the timestamp so I can go back and find it and clip that, because I like that. You know, you don't believe in the abolition of it, you believe in its obsolescence. And that's freaking beautiful. Yeah,
I can say another statement about that if you'd like.
Go for it.
So the thing that I say to people is like, and I say this at Anarchapulco, is I say, look, like every anarchist in here would like push a button and like make the government go away. But then there's a power vacuum and there's a void. And it is completely understandable that there are a bunch of people out there that are totally afraid of what will fill that void. It is like completely and utterly understandable that like your friend who is, you know, like minorities, vulnerable populations, all sorts of people will go, oh shit, if there's no government, who is to protect me from these crazy people over here, or these people who choose not to serve me because I'm gay or black or woman or whatever, you know, like it's scary for people to conceptualize, and it's completely understandable that it's scary. And so like what I say is that libertarians should really spend our energy in finding the problems that are currently public, right? They're currently like how do we educate like children in mass at scale? Right? That's a real problem. Like, will every family be able to homeschool? Like, will everyone be able to afford private school? These are real problems that every American is concerned about. And then we're going like, oh yeah, we'll just abolish. And people are like, but I can't handle that. And so what you have to do is you have to show people like, there's a problem. You've shown me the problem. And now here's a solution for that problem, like that a libertarian's working on. So, you know, look at Dale Brown talking about private like security companies, because like the police in Detroit, where is he from? But like the police where he is are just so incompetent. Now that he has like a private security force that offers free help to those who can't afford it. And then you have like someone like Khan Academy doing, you know, trying to educate people in that way. There's a teenager from Europe, Boylan Slat, who cares about the environment and wants to stop like global warming and all these things, but pollution and littering is a huge thing for him. So he's working on technology to help clean the oceans of plastic. There's all these people doing, and this is my favorite one, is who will build the roads? Every time someone asks you the question, like who will build the roads, or what will we do about this, or what we will do about that? There is like Domino's Pizza started like a paving campaign to like go around to neighborhoods and you could nominate a pothole and they would have this truck come in and be like paving for pizza. And they would literally just fill that pothole and like do a bunch of like good market advertising for free. Like they fill that pothole and then they get a bunch of free advertising. Their pizza might be shit, but now you're considering trying it. And like, that's like what that's what I want. I totally want like every pothole to be branded with some fucking corporation that's decided that they're going to do that to help the people. And also, while you're at it, remember to get, you know, Beyond Chicken at KFC, whatever the thing is, do it. And so I talk about this and I say, look, like, we need to show people that there are solutions to private solutions to public problems. And once we have private solutions to public problems, we can see people just move over to them instead of government. And so then you don't even need to worry about getting rid of government. You just make it obsolete. Everyone just upgrades their computers, you know, like that's what I want. So sorry, there was another long thing, but that's what I like to do.
Yeah, I think that what you're speaking on, and like all of these kind of the objections that you have to overturn, to put it in kind of a sales terminology, is why I've very often focus on trying to impart the life philosophy onto people rather than the political ideology.
Yeah.
Because if you can get them to understand at the core of their being that you are not to hurt people or to take their stuff, and that you shouldn't care too much about how that person is living their life, then they can take that and apply it to say roads or schools or something like that, where they've identified that this life philosophy that you live makes sense and sounds good and seems to be working out well for you. Right. And they're starting to impart that, and then they end up almost playing devil's advocate more than they have those like debates with other libertarians where somebody else, some statist friend of theirs, says something that they're like, wait, that conflicts with this new life philosophy that I have.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't need the government to build the roads. Maybe we don't need public school to be, at least in the way that it is, you know, maybe there's a different option. And they end up reasoning with themselves into to a more liberty mindset. And you don't even have to do anything. You're not even there. And they're convincing themselves.
Yep. The seeds of doubt. And I love to do it with like, I think so much more liberty messaging should just be inspirational. And when you do that, it's like not about government. It's not about why government is bad. It's about like it's not actually, oh God, I'm going to quote Nick Sarwark. I can't believe I'm going to do this. I love Nick. I love Nick on a personal, like friendly, like on a friend level. Like we have sometimes disagreements about things, but this quote, he said, it's not about limited government. It's about unlimited individuals. And I love that, because I love the idea. I mean, it is about limited government, but at the end of the day, like it's about like helping people flourish. And I love people. The reason I'm a libertarian is because I love other people. Like if I want to be free, like there are plenty of ways I can get away with it. Like, you know, I can go out to a cabin in the woods and do my thing. There are states I could live in that would give me more like freedom in various capacities. I could get off the grid. I could try to go like live in an anarchist commune in Nicaragua or Mexico or wherever. There's all sorts of people doing that shit. Right. Mm-hmm. But like, I'm fighting like for everyone to be free. And that means like, I do that because I love them, because like, I'm like, dude, like, you know, way to go with your podcast. Like, I want you to do more of you, right? Like what makes you happy? What makes you tick? What makes like, how can you flourish? And how can like, what in the world is like stopping you from flourishing? And how can I help like get rid of those things that are like, that are holding you down. Right. And maybe some of it's just your own shit, but like, is the government doing that in any way? Like, I'd like to help get that out of your way. Like, and that's how I feel about it, is I look at around and I'm like, I'm a libertarian because I fucking love other people, and I want you to be free, and I want you to be happy, and I want you to flourish. And like, and that's such a thing that I feel like so many libertarians like forget about. They're like, well, I just want the government to leave me alone. And I'm like, I want the government to leave everyone alone. And I want them to flourish. That's such a huge thing that I believe that like, you know, we're like these little plants, and we've got access to, you know, like we're getting like limited access to sunlight and rain and fresh air, and like get rid of the fucking, like the fucking tent and like, all right, we have fucking our own sunlight and air and rain, and now we can flourish because we don't have this thing restricting us. And so it's, you know, that I just came up with that, so that is not as clean a metaphor as I'd like. But like that's the thing.
Like sunflowers.
We are. We're flowers, goddammit. Sorry, I work in the drug industry. We like a lot of flower references. It's like everything's a flower. Everything. Oh, the flowers. They're just those sticky buds. They just growing because they're flowers. It's a thing. An Avens is a flower, just for the record. Like,
oh, I don't think I knew that.
Huh. It's a type of flower. Yeah. That grows in the mountains, and it grows in like low altitude and high altitude, low oxygen environments. So, you know, I like to think it's a flower that you know can withstand a lot of shit, a lot of like hostile conditions. And so there's me. I try to make the world a less hostile place, but I do it by going into hostile conditions.
I love it. So you were talking about the work that you're doing in the psilocybin industry, and you know, how the stuff that you've been doing in California. Tell me about your Trip Sister and where the idea for that came from.
So your Trip Sister it's something I've like soft launched back like last month, and I've been scripting and I've been recording videos for, but it's going to be a series of videos and other things that go on social media that's going to be talking about drugs. And so it's my pet issue. I love like my pet issues in the liberty space are like abortion and then drugs and criminal justice reform and law enforcement reform kind of stuff. Like those are like the things that like make me the most excited. And I care about all the other stuff too, but these are the things that really get me going. And so when it comes to drugs, like I am a big advocate for like responsible drug use, and I'm a big advocate for making sure that like no getting in the way of other people doing it, even if you choose not to. And so one of the biggest things is like a lot of people can't talk about drugs because of their jobs or because of their like whatever they've got in their lives, like their family is judgmental, or they'll lose a job or whatever, and so they can't talk about drugs. And what bothers me about that is that like so many people do psychedelics or do any other drug, and like it's hard to collect experiences to say, hey, these are the effects of here, you know, here's what we should know about dosage and everything else. If it's illegal, you don't get as much information about that, and you're not sure if that information is accurate. And it's especially common among young people. And also you just don't get a lot of good testimonies as to like, hey, like I'm a successful person who has done drugs. And now we have like Silicon Valley CEOs who microdose on acid or mushrooms and things like that. And we're getting a lot more of like trickles of that information. But what I want to do is it's going to be a series of videos talking about like the effects of various psychedelic drugs, like what to prepare yourself for if you do any of these, what the dosages are, how to know if you're overdosing. You know, it's good to know when should you bring your friend to the hospital if they took MDMA and they don't seem to be okay, you know, what should you do if your friend is like tripping on mushrooms and freaking the fuck out? Well, first off, don't worry, they're not overdosing. So here's what you do to help them. And so basically teaching people about the effects of, the dosages of, like, and how to do these things safely. And so it's going to be a series of videos like that. It's like I'm your big sister who's like, hey, when your friends are thinking about doing drugs, like, let me tell you how to do them safely. And so I'm going to hit like, you know, MDMA, LSD, psilocybin, DMT, ayahuasca, ketamine, like pot. Like I'll talk about like what people want to hear about, but I want it to be a place where you can like, if you've ever wondered, like, you know, why do I have trouble sleeping or eating after a night rolling on Molly? Like, I want to tell you like how that happens in like with serotonin in your brain, or like how do you prevent these particular hangovers around these particular like drugs. And like that's stuff that like people don't talk about because they're afraid because they're going to lose their jobs. I will not lose my job. I am self-employed, and everyone I work with is like works with drugs. They're like, yeah, but my biggest investor is like, I love this idea. Your Trip Sister's incredible. Like, perfect. And so the whole concept is like very shareable, bite-sized information about psychedelic drugs so you can do them safely. And then it's going to be littered with like why these need to be decriminalized, because this information, like, you never know what you're getting when you get a pill of Molly, because you can't, like, you can test it, but besides that, you have no fucking clue. And like the reason you have no clue is because it's illegal. And how harmful is that? How many people's lives have been ruined because it's illegal? And so talking about decriminalization in that form, there's going to be a lot of that kind of content. So I highly recommend people check it out. I'm hoping to make it very fun. I'm hoping to make it very, very easy to understand. I'm going to talk about like, this is serotonin and this is dopamine. This is what they do in your brain, but it's not going to be like hard sciencey. It's going to be like layman's terms, like what are the drugs you're choosing to doing to your brain in a way that you can understand so that you can do them safely or not do them at all, or send it to your little sister who might be doing drugs that you're like, okay, I don't want to be impositional. I just want to let you know so you don't get like fucked up and take some Molly at a club and get raped. Like people just, these are so many things that like people get hurt, not because of the drug, but because they don't know. And so that's my big thing right now.
I love it. It's a really crucial thing, and you're 100% right that because of the war on drugs, it's something that there's just not nearly enough information out there about. And like, I'm still like, having done a decent number of the drugs you just named, I'm still missing a couple, but I still like think back to the stuff that I learned in like 7th and 8th grade health class about drugs when thinking about drugs. And I know for a fact that at least half of what I learned is entirely bullshit.
Yep.
But the other half is still in my brain as like fact somehow until I like unlearn each and every piece of it. And there's just not that level of knowledge on it. And it definitely the stigma that you're talking about of like, you know, if you talk about it, you might lose your job, you might like come under fire from your family or your friends or something like that, is something that I've personally tried my best to fight against. I remember like I've been a stoner since I was like 18, but I used to hide it, and I used to be like really shy about it, and I used to not talk to my family about it. I wouldn't talk to any of like my church friends, especially. Like they could never know that I turned out to be one of those evil stoner kids that like listen to rock music and go to parties and drink alcohol. So I used to really hide that stuff, and I got to the point where I was technically on paper, it was a very small company, but I was a CEO of a finance company at the age of 20, and I was. Thank you. I ended up closing the company to go back to work for somebody else, and then quit that job to get into politics. And now it's been that shit show for the last 3 years. But I was in a position where like, there's no one to fire me. Like you said, like I'm self-employed. People respect me for unknown reasons because of my title, and I'm like, I'm done hiding this. Like, we need to show people that you can be a 21-year-old burnout stoner that makes it in finance, and like that's a completely possible thing. And not all stoners are those lazy whatever stereotype you want to attribute to us. And I'm kind of like having the same slow path with like psychedelics, because I started doing psychedelics and I was kind of hush about it, and I was like, well, these are like really illegal, and these are like, especially acid, I'm like, I can't even use this is natural, because like it's not, right? Like, I like leaned on that argument with weed for so long that like when I started doing acid, I was like, shit, now what do I say? And so I was kind of hush about it, but now I'm like, the amount of good that my psychedelic usage has done to me and the people around me, just because of how much better of a person I am right now than I was a year and a half ago, before I started like working on myself and like doing all of these psychedelics and having these like deep conversations while on psychedelics and really working through shit. Like it's been a very positive thing in my life, and I'm not gonna hide why that is. Like, I'm gonna tell people, because nothing has helped me manage like the symptoms of my ADHD like doing psychedelics. And so I talk to people with ADHD, and they just can't wrap their head around some of the realizations I've come to over the last couple of years. I'm like, bro, do some acid and do it like this. Like, do some acid with this intention of just like trying to avoid don't touch your phone, don't touch any form of like really engaging media, like just activate 1 or 2 senses at a time and really fight like everything that you think is associated with your ADHD. And it'll be possible because you're tripping. And you can get so into just music that you can just lay perfectly still listening to music for an hour, which is something that someone with ADHD can't do sober. It's just not possible. And so, yeah, I've tried to like be more open about that over the last few months and plan to continue to do so, because I personally think it's like really important, and it's really exciting that some states are starting to move on this, and we're actually starting to see some science and some business behind it. I'm excited about what that can do.
It's so crazy here in like California. Like Oakland has decriminalized psilocybin, and so like I know growers who specifically just sell to chocolate companies that are in Oakland. Like it's just that like it's such a random specific thing, because it's like, okay, this is like a city that they have to work in, but then there's like these great psilocybin chocolate companies in Oakland, and you can go into like a dispensary and you will find psilocybin there, which is like totally rad. But yeah, like that's the thing, is that once I started doing drugs, like once I started doing psychedelics, and here's the thing, it's like family. Like my mother used to tell me about her acid trips back in the day. Like my mother really loved like peyote, mescaline, and then of course like Timothy Leary used to come to conventions, which is just like, I love that. And then my dad, I smoke weed with my dad every time I see him, and like and he always, his welcome to the family gift whenever I've like dated a boyfriend for like longer than a year is like mushrooms. Like he's like welcome to the family, like you guys should do you should do some mushrooms together. And so Judd and I, when we started dating in August of 2012, and like literally we started in October of 2012. We just started doing acid together. And so literally once a month we would do acid together, at like every month. And then at some point in like the spring of 2013, we switched to shrooms every month. And like we just like the first year or two of our relationship was just like really diving deep into each other on drugs. And I really feel like it's made us, like our relationship is so fantastic because of that. Like we have this really strong bond. And we run a company together, we live together, we work together, we do activism together. Like that can drive you crazy if you spend that much time with someone. But like we've also had so much time to kind of like explore each other's brains while like tripping, and also kind of work through like our blockages and boundaries and like barriers and things like that. And so like I just got to a point where I was like, I just need to talk about this with everyone. And so like I've always been somebody who advocates, like I started doing shrooms and I was like, I got to tell everybody about this. And now I'm like, yeah, no, I do them. And now it's a very matter of fact, not like that friend of yours who's like, have you tried CBD and yoga to solve your problems? Like, it's not that. It's like, cause there's all those people. Like, I'm like, no. I'm not like that obnoxious person. I'm like, yeah. Mm-hmm. I do drugs. Like I do drugs. I'm not afraid of telling you that I do drugs. Like it's funny because when I talk to like teenagers or children, like I have other ways of expressing it, because I'll say like, there's a lot of medicine out there that isn't like traditional medicine. And so like I usually use that for kids, because I don't want to like I don't want parents freaking out at me because I just told their kids like to try drugs. But like but I like to say, like there's some substances out there that are medicine, and they can help us with our minds, and they can also be fun. But also like what I like to do, and I do this in all of my bios now, is like when I speak at an event, I put like, Avens O'Brien, a second generation libertarian, can be found, blah, blah, blah. Like, I, do my little thing. And then the last thing, it always says like, you can find her at Burning Man. She says yes to drugs. Like, I love saying that, because it's just so much fun. I feel like I'm going to have to replace it at some point. But my favorite thing to say is like, she says yes to drugs.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's funny you bring the kids back up to kind of go full circle in the conversation, because I had to very quickly come to terms with how I was gonna approach that situation. A couple months ago, I was hanging out with my sister's kids who are 5, 3, and 2 at the moment. And the 3-year-old like walked up to me smoking a joint and said that, like, they were like, I want to try. And I'm like, oh shit, this just got really real. Like, I've been kind of just like hiding it from them, and like most of the time they don't see me smoke. Maybe my nephew, the oldest, has seen me smoke because I'll like take him outside with me because I'm the only person that like wants to go outside, and he likes to be outside. So I'll be like, hey, I'll watch you outside while I smoke a cigarette or a joint or whatever. And then, you know, he actually gets some time to run around outside. But he's oblivious to most things, and so he's just paying attention to the fact that he's outside. So it was never really a problem. His little sister is way more like intuitive and empathetic and perceptive. She's either going to be evil or wonderful when she's older, and I can't tell which one it is. She scares me sometimes.
She's going to be a cult leader. Cult leader.
Fingers crossed that it's like a nice anarchist cult. Like, I hope that I rub off on her enough that it's a good anarchist cult, and that she doesn't glean too much of the status bullshit from her mom.
Send her my way, I'll help.
Will do. But yeah, she came up and was like, I want to try, and I had to explain to her try to explain to a 3-year-old why what I was doing isn't okay for her, but isn't bad that I'm doing it. You know, it's not like because I don't want to approach it like my parents approached drinking when I was growing up or something like that, where it's like, oh, this is just for the big kids. Like, this is a bad thing that you shouldn't do, and we're just doing it in moderation. And like my parents weren't alcoholics or anything. My dad was, you know, maybe 3 beers a week kind of a person. So they were being honest when they said that kind of stuff. And like, they still kind of like kept the taboo attached to alcohol, even though there was always alcohol in our house. And I don't want to do that, especially not around weed, because I think that it's better and safer than alcohol. But I still had to somehow explain why I wasn't going to let her take a puff of my joint at 3. And I have another friend whose 16-year-old is like hounding them. Like, they want a vape pen and they want to smoke weed. And I'm like, that's a little still young, and like, but also is it? And it's an interesting conundrum to come to. And unfortunately, because like we've been talking with the war on drugs, we don't have a lot of the science or the correct mindset around it to really know like what's too young, what's not, where is this beneficial. So again, I'm excited for what we'll learn in the next decade or so as it becomes more legal and more prominent.
For sure. And it's a tricky thing. Like my parents were very open about their previous drug use. Like, you know, I knew that my parents had, you know, done psychedelics and stuff like that. But also, you know, I knew it was something that like kind of, I think my mother actually said, like, this is something that, you know, like adults do it, but the problem is like it can make you kind of vulnerable, and so you have to be in the right space for it. And like, you know, so you have to be a little bit older to be able to like take, you know, like to have it like affect you correctly. Like it was an interesting like my mother wasn't judgmental about it because she'd done it, like she was open about it, but it was very much like a kind of, you know, like this is something that people use like to enjoy and to explore themselves, and you have to like and you need to be a little bit like older to be able to do that effectively. And so, you know, someday you can try this, but you know, you'll want to be in a safe environment, you'll want to be with people that you trust. And like, so I got that whole messaging. And I mean, I really like, I had drugs available to me pretty early. Like my parents didn't have it around for me, but like I had older brothers, and my brothers were good, but like I started college really young because like unschooling and homeschooling stuff, but I started college really young. And as a result, like and then I was hanging out in libertarian circles. So like, if I wanted drugs, I could have had drugs at 14. But I was like, I think when I was 15, like my, some guys in my intro philosophy class in college, 15? Yeah, I think it was 15. Like I actually like during a break, like they were like, hey, you want to come out and smoke with us? And I was like, okay. And so I went out there, and they're like in the gazebo and they were smoking. And I was like, oh, that's that smell that like I used to smell from the garage with dad. Like, you know, just like that the second time that you smell marijuana when you're an adult and you like the first time you smell it as an adult and you realize you've smelled it before as a child, like that smell. And so I had that and I was like, oh, right. And then I like wimped out. I was like, no, you smoke. That's cool. And I was actually very good at saying no. Like, I just was like, no, I want to hang with you guys. I just don't know if I want to smoke that yet. And then it was like, I think it was like another year before I was like, okay, can I try it this time? And I tried it a little bit. And then I was just like hungry. And like, I was like, I don't get it. Like, I'm hungry and I'm very confused about like time, like like how long, like time dilation is weird. Like, and then like when I was 19, I basically just started doing all of the psychedelics. So I had a summer of adventure and it was fantastic. And it was like, I was surrounded by older friends who taught me exactly how to do them safely. And I was like, everyone needs to have this and not everyone does. And then I would encounter like I had friends who were my age. And I would like run into their little sister at the mall and their little sister would be like, yeah, my friends and I are going to do some ecstasy. And I was like, oh, cool. Can you tell me about that? I'm not going to stop you. I just want to know what you're thinking. And like, I would hear things like, oh, my boyfriend wants us to do it. And I'm like, okay, like, have you been with this boyfriend for a long time? Like, what are you expecting to happen? Because like at that point, it's like, all right, like, if she does that, then there might be consent issues if like she's not like, so I want to know if she's like down for what she's like, what is she expecting? And like, and how should she deal with this? And is it pure? And like all these questions. And I was like, okay, I'm getting in on the little sister. Like, I was like, okay, like, what did your boyfriend tell you about it? And like, what are your plans? And what are you going to do about it? And I was like, oh God, I'm being a little bit overbearing, but I'm also not telling her how not to do it. And if she'd asked me to get it for her, I probably would have done that because I'd rather they get it from me than from someone else. So it's a tricky conundrum when it comes to children. But at the end of the day, like, I don't like to lie to children and I want to make sure that they're safe in the choices that they make that may be very they might make those choices whether or not we like stop them, like whether we try to stop them, they might try to find another way. And if they do, they might do it dangerously. And so,
especially if we're raising them as good libertarians and anarchists, they're probably going to be at least enough of a contrarian to try to still do it anyway if you try to stop them.
I feel like I'm going to end up with like kids who are like, no, mom, I'm going to get up early in the morning and I'm going to like have like a totally normal job. And I'm going to like totally like work, like I'm going to work a totally normal job and I'm never going to do any drugs. And I'm going to convert to Mormonism. And I'm like, what the fuck did I do? Like, that's how all my children will have to rebel because like Jed and I are night owls. I woke up at like 2 this afternoon. Like, I run a company and I go to bed at like 5 a.m. But like, I lead a very particular life that I have worked very hard to make happen. And like, and I'm just imagining like how my kids are going to fuck it up. Like, and or just choose or make choices about like that are totally different than my choices. Like, my mother and I, like, my mother raised me to do me and to do it however I want to do. But I made choices that were not quite what she was expecting. And like, we're cool. Like, it was fine. But like the internet exists now. And that was not a thing when she was young. So, there are choices I make that are like now on the internet. There are naked pictures of me on the internet. And like, my mother is like, that is not quite the choice I was going for, but are you happy with what you did? And I'm like, yes. And she's like, okay. Like, I raised you in a way so that you would be like really self-actualized and self-possessed of like your own ability to consent, your own agency and your own whatever. So the decisions you make are yours and the internet scares the shit out of me. Like, like, and I was like, I'm in, I am so doing these things. And so, like even, the most libertarian parents are still going to be like, oh, that just happened. Like, there will be something. Who the fuck knows what'll happen when, like, in 20 years, like, my kids will be experiencing. I'll be like, oh my God, you're having like sex with an AI robot in virtual space. Like, who the fuck knows? Who knows what will be there? And I just want to be like, I hope everyone's consenting and being kind. Like,
I hope the Molly's pure. Yeah, and it's really a fun topic and one of the reasons why I was really excited about this episode is because most of my friends are between 5 to 10 years older than me, and so most of my friends have kids between the ages of like 3 and 10, and they're actual like big L libertarians who are trying to raise children, and most of us were raised by little L libertarians who we had to like drag into the party with us afterwards. And so like we can point to various pieces of our libertarian upbringing, but we still had to like overcome a lot of the brainwashing and the statism and the nationalism. At least for me, like I was raised very nationalistic, very like pro-military, very neocon. And so like I had to break those walls down, and talking to my friends about like how do we raise a kid that is going to listen to what we tell them to do and like behave and not be a shit monster of a child that's just unbearable, but also not like put this constraint on them that would make them a status, allow them to be able to live their own lives and have those freedoms and those thought processes. And it's a really difficult line to walk. And all my friends are, kind of taking slightly different approaches to it. And I'm glad I'm a little bit younger than most of my friends and I get to watch them and analyze a little bit.
Yes.
But there aren't a whole lot of people that I know that are in your position where, you didn't have to go through that breaking down, and you are a product of what most of my friends are trying to create right now, and seems to have turned out quite well.
I like it. I mean, it's funny because I think I was like a very bratty child in that I've never been afraid of authority. I've never been like, these are all things that my parents were like, okay, like consent is a big thing all through your life. I've written an article about like the day that a Santa Claus at a holiday party like picked me up and I hadn't consented to that. He basically he was wandering. It was my dad's work Christmas party. And I didn't have like Santa Claus. So like I wasn't used to it. So like Santa was over there talking to the other kids. And then like Santa saw like the cute little redheaded girl that he hadn't talked to yet. And so he was like, ho, ho, ho. And then he like went to pick me up and put me on his knee. And I was like, what the fuck? Some strangers picking me up. And I just freaked out. I screamed at the top of my lungs and I kicked him in the shins. And then he like dropped me and I ran. And so like later, so then everyone's like, what the fuck just happened? And Santa's like, she kicked me in the shins. And my mother is like, oh my God. So my brother like climbs under the Christmas tree to find me because I had hidden there. And then he grabs me and he's like, it's okay. It's okay. And then like, Mom talks to Santa and Santa's like, oh, like she kicked me in the shins. And she's like, well, why did she kick you in the shins? And he's like, well, I went to pick her up because like she hasn't told me what she wants for Christmas. And my mother was like, did you ask before you picked her up? And he was like, no. And then she's like, well, then you owe her an apology. And so like then she makes like, she's like, Avens, come here. And like he's not gonna hurt you. And like here I am with Santa Claus and I just like that face, and like and Santa looks at me and is like and my mother's like, Santa, what do you have to say? And he was like, I'm very sorry that I picked you up without asking. And I was like, good. Like just like I was like, good, I'm glad you're sorry. Like, you don't get to do that. And I think like at that point I got shy and I was like, kicking the floor a little bit, like, good. Can I go now? Like, and like, I went away and like, and later Santa Claus came over with a present because they'd gotten presents for all the little kids, and it was just like I just didn't give a shit because I was a weird kid. Also, the pictures from that Christmas are so awkward because I also just cut my hair, and so I like chopped off all of my hair because you're 4, that's what you do, and like so I cut off all my hair, and I was in this dress that I didn't like it, and I was just unhappy because of Santa, and so there's like this family picture that I never post because we all look so awkward in it, but like me in that picture, like I'm holding my teddy bear, and I'm like I have like shorn cut hair. I look like a little pixie, and I'm just like, I'm just so angry, but like Santa brought over a present and was like, may I give her a present? And Mom was like, will you take a present from Santa Claus? And I was like, fine. And so like I like take it and like,
thank you. And like, just, you know, then go off into a corner to like open it. Like when you give like a cat a treat and they go in like in the corner to eat it, you know what I mean? Like I would like, but it was so funny because I was a well-behaved child, like in certain ways. Like I was like, I'm not here to fuck up adults. I'm not here to like be annoying. Like if I was annoying, my mother would say, hey, you're being really annoying and we don't really want to spend time with you. And I would be like, oh, like, what do I do to not be annoying? And she'd be like, you could be quiet and let someone else talk for a little while, which I've clearly not learned that lesson.
Like, yeah. You win some, you lose some.
Yeah, but that was the thing, is like my mother basically treated me like a miniature adult. And like, you know, some mornings she'd be like, what do you want for breakfast? And I'd be like, ice cream. And she'd be like, okay, like you're gonna be hungry later and you're gonna be sorry that you asked for ice cream when you should have had like, you know, French toast or whatever. But okay, cool, have ice cream. And I would eat ice cream. And like my mother was like, you're gonna live your own consequences. I'm gonna make sure you don't kill yourself. Like that's like really my job. Like don't kill yourself. Everything's fine. And so yeah, if you want to eat ice cream like for 4 meals straight, at some point you'll get sick of it and you won't eat ice cream again for months. And that was true.
Yeah, it's funny you say that exact phrase of like a mini adult, because I hear that fairly often from, you know, the aforementioned friends who are trying to raise their kids like this. And the first couple times I heard it, I was like really off put by the very concept of it, because I was raised fairly strictly. You know, I like to think that my parents walked a fairly decent line of this conundrum, but you know, I didn't cut my hair weird ever because I would have gotten my ass whooped. Like
Oof,
I like that's actually a thing that I can't relate to, and I feel like most of my friends can, and I've just like never would have done something like that. And you know, a lot of my friends, you know, I'll like go to their houses, and from my point of view, like especially comparing it to my childhood, I'm like, I couldn't imagine like leaving that kind of a mess in the living room, or like, you know, being as loud and obnoxious as some of my friends' kids are, because like I would have been terrified to do that growing up. And so like it's a culture shock for me personally to like see this more kind of free parenting and like treating your kids like mini adults and like actually with respect and like their own agency is just something that I never conceptualized as a kid, and it's really weird to see. And like the first couple times, like I said, when I heard it, I was very like off put, and I was like, no, but they're not. Like you have to treat them like kids. And the more I see it and the more I talk to other people, the more I think I'm wrong. And you know, like it's actually great. And there are lessons, like I'm talking to like 6-7-year-olds about various things, and like they're explaining to me life lessons that I didn't learn until I was in college, because I didn't have the ability to make some mistakes that, you know, other people made and make those choices. And you know, it's crazy to see these kids, like they're growing up so much faster and becoming so much more mature than I was at their age in a lot of ways, even if they might seem less behaved from an outside perspective. I guess I'm not sure as much as I used to be how important that part of it is.
Yeah. Well, and if you treat kids like mini adults also, there is some justification for like, you know, just kind of saying like, well, like, you know, this is your life, your mess. You have to clean up the living room because that's your mess. And like, you know, mommy will clean up the living room of her mess and whatever. And so it's going to be interesting because like my home, like here, like Judd and I will probably have kids in the next couple of years. And we're both like so organized and clean and like everything. Like, I'm just imagining like toys in our house. And I'm like, this is going to be so weird. But it's funny because I think about that. And I think about how like my mother would just be like, look, you can make your room can be as messy as you want. And I remember once, like, I think my mother had some friends over for dinner, and I always like, I sat with the adults and I like, and I would like listen to their conversations. And then like mom, you know, I'd be like, oh, I know this one. I saw in the news about the thing. And like, and I would like kind of contribute my own thing. And there were times though that mom would be like, all right, well, everyone has a turn to talk. And so if I was going to be loud and obnoxious and annoying, I had to do it somewhere else. But I remember very specifically, like, my mother sometimes said really harsh things to me, and I'm totally okay with it now, but it was really funny because like I would be babbling on about something and she'd be like, yeah, Avens, if you're gonna like take over the room, like you should make it interesting. And I was like, oh, and so I honestly, I think it may be a better storyteller, like, because I was like, oh, I have to, like, if I'm going to have your attention, I need to deserve it. And I feel like, honestly, I think that taught me a lot about talking about liberty and talking about like just stuff like, and like sales. Because it's like, you have gifted me your attention. What am I going to do with it? Like, am I going to make it interesting? Like, am I going to interest you? Am I going to amuse you? Am I going to teach you something? Am I going to make, like, is it going to be funny? Like, you have gifted me with your attention and I have this chance to have it. What am I going to do with it? And, and if I have a limited amount of it, like, what do I want you to come away with? What do I want you to know that, do I want you to know that I'm smart? Do I want you to know that I'm right? Do I want you to know that, like, there's hope out there? Do I want you to know that, like, there's something bigger that, like, what am I teaching you in this moment? And that was like largely the reason that I supported Vermin Supreme for the nomination in 2020. As I said, I'm going to have the public's attention for a very small amount of time. And what can I teach them about liberty in that moment? And I feel like when talking about messaging and talking about anything else, I think that that's something that my mother taught me. And you have my attention for a limited amount of time. What is important that I know? And when it comes to, like, you've got my fucking, you're on Twitter or you're whatever, you're on social media, you're going to get someone's attention. What do you teach them in that moment? Like, do you teach them that libertarianism is compassionate? Do you teach them that it is kind? Do you teach them that it is a way for you to flourish? Or do you teach them that it's edgelord shit? Like, you've got an opportunity and we can all make a different choice, and but think about it, because like that's your chance.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I love
that I segued that around to like what my family taught me that now equates to my libertarian. Sorry.
Yeah, you just wrap that entire episode up into a perfect little bow, and I don't think I'm gonna butcher it by trying to follow it up. So before we wrap up, I do want to give you one more opportunity to tell people how to find you, how to support the work that you're doing, some of the things that you're involved in. Pitch yourself.
So you can follow me. So my name, Avens O'Brien, all one word, all lowercase, is on all the social medias. So like the Twitter, Instagram, I think TikTok, I might be Apples O'Brien, but it's not important. Then I also have Your Trip Sister. So I have Your Trip Sister on all the socials. And so I would love follows there. I would love to have people sharing, my content and engaging with it. And then the other thing that isn't listed here, like I've seen all the scrolling, whatever, but I do have a Substack, and I have been making, I've been trying to do regular essays there. I have been failing terribly at it, but I will continue to do so. It's avens.substack.com. And if you go to my socials, you will also find a link to that. But I would love subscribers to my Substack, because I will be linking to the other work that I do. Substack is where I do long form content. I talk about liberty. I talk about culture. I talk about all sorts of shit. And it's also free to follow me there, but if people like giving me money, I don't say no. So there. So yes, thank you, by the way, David, for having me on and letting me do that. And so,
yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. This was so much fun. Was
it Brianna that said that I should come on? Somebody was recommending me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Which is funny, because she made that comment the day after I messaged you and invited you on, which was perfect timing. I've heard so much about you from Livy and Dimitri, and just the work that you're doing, and then followed you online. And you debated one of my good friends on feminism probably a year ago, and that was probably I think the first thing I actually watched you do, which was really funny.
Was it the one where the guy came in and was like, "Yeah, so if girls want to pay for their own shit," was it that one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. What was your friend on? I'm sorry.
Well, it was so great because I've had the feminism debate with him so many times, like in person, like over blunts, and just like really, really in-depth arguments where I'm just like basically defending the existence of women, it seems like. And so to watch somebody else finally like take him to the woodshed was fun. It was very enjoyable for me.
I think after that discussion, I'm pretty sure like I messaged like the moderator and I was like, I was like prepared, and then I kind of felt like I had to like I didn't want to look like I was like I don't know, like kicking someone disabled. Like it just felt like I was ready for like a discussion in which there was going to be facts and things, and then I was like, I just when like if you're having a battle with an unarmed opponent, like you sometimes have to like put the weapons away. Like you're just like, okay, sorry, man. Okay, that's very mean to your friend. I'm sorry. He was entertaining as hell, but I was like, was that okay? Should we re-record that with somebody who like isn't like doesn't show up and like seem like they have no idea what they're talking about? Because I'm terrified. Like.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Yeah, he's an interesting fellow. He's great. One of my favorite things about him,
Cash, was that his name? Cash?
Yeah, Cash, or Manuel is his actual name. He's been on the show a few times, and I've been on his a few times as well. But he's one of the most like actually shows up to shit people that we have in the New York party, and so like I have a lot of respect for him. Like there's been a lot of instances where it's just like me and him and one of his random friends that's barely even a libertarian, just like the three of us in like Larry Sharp t-shirts at like some Puerto Rican Day parade or something like that, just like handing out lit. Like he is there, and I love him, but he has some. He's delved way too deep into like the men go their own way red pill like movement on the interwebs.
And look like it.
Poisoned pieces of his brain.
It's all good. It's all good. But you know what? Like, let's take a second to appreciate people who show up, because like so often like people are getting all caught up in the politics of it, or even ideological debates like me and Cash being like feminism. Like, show up, and like I work with people who show up, and I like you know I collect petitions with people who show up, and you know like it's so amazing when people actually show up and they do something, and they just like they show up and they're like, I'm gonna make like I'm in this situation and I'm going to make it better. Like I love that. Like, hey, like show up and serve this space in some way. So you know, good for him. I'm glad he's useful in some way.
Yeah, to come back full circle to a Nick Sarwark quote, the party is made up of the people that show up. Just
It's true. It's true.
Well, Avens, thank you so much for coming on. This was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you for adding the Substack scroll. Like,
I got you. That link is also in the description if you're watching this on Odysee or YouTube, so you can click on that. Definitely go follow Avens on all of the things at both of those ads that have been scrolling across the bottom. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, go over to Odysee and follow us over there, because I really cannot stress this enough. Fuck YouTube. Go to Odysee. My channel is not gonna last much longer on YouTube. We know this.
If you say fuck YouTube, they have more reason to get rid of you. Just saying.
Yeah. At this point, I think I'm safe because my following is still fairly small, but I have friends who have even smaller followings than mine who are getting videos taken down for things that I've said verbatim on my show. So we don't have much longer, guys. So go join Odysee. It's better anyway, and you actually own your own content and you get to earn crypto when you use it, and it's super fun. And then come back here next week, because we'll be back with Eric Rodsep and Joshua Eagle, and we're gonna have a great time. Till then, keep up the fight.
Shut up and sit down.